Namaskar, this is Late Edition. On the show tonight, we'll discuss the implications, trying to decode the reasons for the floods in Jammu and Kashmir, and also whether the recent phenomena of natural disasters are actually natural disasters or they are man-made. Now, first, let's look at the ground situation.
It's been a week now, and what we are hearing now, the situation on ground, the focus has now shifted to the relief camps, but the need of the hour there is the relief and rehabilitation. That is what people are now expecting from the state government.
This time we are in a far-flung village of Smot in Rajouri district, where army has set up a medical camp and other facilities are being provided to the people, those who are totally cut off from rest of the country. So we have with us Brigadier Walia, who is supervising all these camps and relief operations. He will brief us what are the measures being taken by army for the people. Brigadier Walia, would you please brief us what are the measures you have taken to provide relief to the people?
There were massive landslides. Huge number of houses and docks were under these landslides. Relief operations on a big scale were launched to rescue people who were under these slides. A lot of people were saved, number of them were saved. Some of them are even present here in this camp today. You are now at Samot relief camp, where people are being given medical aid, they are being given food and shelter, they are being distributed with blankets, as well as other facilities like recreation and mobile charging.
In the last 5 days, in the last 4 weeks or so, people have been, more than 30,000 people, that's what the state claims, have been evacuated and taken to the safer zones.
The army is reaching to the people in far-flung areas and provided all sort of support to the public. This is Sanjeet Khajuria reporting from far-off village of Smot in Rajouri district for Doordarshan News.
With camera person Rajesh Ricky and assistant Saurabh, Sakal Bhatt for Doordarshan from Srinagar.
Joining us in the studio to discuss this, we have with us Joydeep Gupta, who is an environmentalist, journalist. He's the South Asia director of Third Pole, and they focus very much on the Himalayan region and the water systems in the Himalayas. And we have Vinod Chandra Menon, who is a former member of the National Disaster Management Authority. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. We'll start with you, Mr. Gupta. Looking at this, I mean, we understand that we can anticipate a lot of things like landslides, but a flood like this, what are the main reasons in your opinion for this kind of a flood?
It rained about 250 millimeters according to the Srinagar Weather Office in 72 hours between 3rd and 6th September. So the floods would have happened. It's a question of how bad the floods would have been. I would say that there are 4 main reasons why these floods have become as bad as they are.
Okay, tell us what these are.
The first reason is that absolutely rampant construction on the floodplains of these rivers and streams, or right on the banks of the lakes like Dal and Nagin, even Vular. That's the first reason. The second reason is deforestation in the catchment areas of Jhelum, Chenab, Indus and of the streams. The third big reason is totally unregulated dumping of garbage from all the towns, cities, villages into all these water bodies, these rivers. And the fourth again is unscientific and unregulated use of fertilizers, which get into the extra ones, get into the waterways and choke it up. The overall result of all this is choking of the rivers.
Choking of the rivers itself.
So there isn't any place for the water to go except to go
There's
out.
no drainage.
Yeah.
Right. So, Mr. Vinod Chandra Menon, I mean, there are one of the ways of preventing disasters is like this is to prevent it, actually, to be prepared and sort of not allow the construction, let's say, on the river banks, etc. Now, I'm sure the NDMA has made certain guidelines and things like that. Are they never implemented? Are they not taken seriously? What's the issue?
I think the National Disaster Management Authority has developed several guidelines, and 3 of them which are extremely important in the Kashmir context is the National Disaster Management Guidelines on the management of floods, the management of urban flooding, and the management of landslides. I think one of the most important issues is that enforcement and compliance to many of the issues which Mr. Joydeep mentioned actually is not really being a priority in many states. In fact, the construction along the floodplains is actually something which is totally prohibited. But at the same time, there is no monitoring, there is no enforcement, and there is very little compliance. And so very often, we tend to turn a blind eye to.
So who's responsible for this? I mean, who would you say? After all, you say that okay, the NDMA's role was to give you the guidelines, and now we've given you the guidelines, but they're not being followed.
Yes, and once the guidelines are there, then the next stage is the preparation of plans. And in some of these things like issues of enforcement, issues of compliance, confirmation to building codes, I think all this becomes important, and then that is the responsibility of the state administration and also of the district administration. The State Disaster Management Authority headed by the State Chief Minister, and the District Disaster Management Authority is headed by the district collectors and also the elected representative of the Jilla Parishads. One of the most important issues which these particular floods have actually brought to the surface is the fact that this needs to be seen as an early warning signal, because if a flood of this magnitude can actually wipe out critical infrastructure like bridges, and this means that even the kind of construction of amenities and infrastructure in a state which is highly prone to earthquakes of high intensity,
right?
So if a flood can actually create such devastation, we should actually ensure that most of these critical infrastructure like telecommunication, water supplies, power supply and power distribution, and bridges, flyovers, all of them have to be multi-hazard resilient.
So, Mr. Joydeep, I mean, this is not the first warning that we've had. We saw the Uttarakhand floods last year, and they were devastating, and there were lessons drawn from that. The lessons were to all the Himalayan states, I suppose. What would you think? I mean, even if we continue to point out lessons, at the end of the day, it's only when you're faced with something like this that you wake up.
Well, hopefully you do wake up. I mean, I'm not sure that the Uttarakhand administration has woken up despite last year's flooding, and that is something I find extremely worrying. Because, as Mr. Menon rightly points out, one can make the recommendations at the central level, but the actual implementation of, if you're building on the floodplain, how is your building plan being passed? Why it shouldn't be passed in the first place?
No, are you talking about these being new buildings, or they may have been buildings that have existed for ages?
Most of them are new. Most of them are new. Most of the the problems on the banks of the Dal and Nagin right now are new hotels which have come up in the last 5 years. Okay. Hotels and restaurants that they are a result of the tourism boom in Kashmir. But it's a question of then who regulates that? It should be the Srinagar municipality. It should be the panchayat in the place, in whichever village. Now you should be able to get a building plan properly passed, and the local authority, if it's in a hazardous zone, as Mr. Menon points out, simply shouldn't be passing that building plan.
Once this sort of a tragedy takes place, I mean, then we look at the rescue operations, and we see that perhaps we are woefully short of crew. I mean, NDRF has a very few numbers of teams, and the Army is the one that's doing most of the work, as always, the Army and the Air Force. And they've done a great job. 42,500 people so far have been evacuated. But I mean, the whole purpose of setting up NDMA and all that was to try and create, specialized forces, and the NDRF is the specialized force.
Right.
Are we ready, I mean, for the kind of disasters that our countries probably can see?
I would actually say that the National Disaster Response Force is probably the only dedicated disaster response agency in the world, which is trained, which has got the capacity to have, search and rescue and evacuation of people. If you recall, in 2008, during the Kosi floods, they evacuated more than 100,000 people over a period of 12 days, in 10-man boats and 30-man boats. So you can imagine that, if 100,000 people have to be evacuated, how many times they have to go up and down to maroon villages and then rescue people.
Right.
And this force is actually also the only international search and rescue team which was there in Japan after the tsunami and the earthquake and the Fukushima nuclear meltdown.
Right.
Which could actually stay there and then help the administration of the local administration in terms of search and rescue and evacuation. They have the capacity now, but at the same time,
but we need more numbers. Do you think so?
And I think it is not not only in terms of the NDRF, in terms of battalions, and they are spread across the country.
Right.
There are 12 battalions now, and it's spread across the country
in vulnerable areas.
In vulnerable areas, especially. But at the same time, I think we need to create capacities in the local communities, because they are always the first responders.
Sure.
So we have the youth in the country. Most of them unemployed, and then most of them really not active during the day. We need to involve them in terms of creating village-level disaster management task forces, create the community-based disaster preparedness as some kind of a national campaign. The Mahila Mandals, the Tarun Mandals, the Nehru Yuva Kendra, the Indian Red Cross volunteers, all of them should be involved in this process. We can actually create a major transformation if many of these disasters, losses could be avoided and minimized. Loss of lives, definitely.
Okay. We need to take a short commercial break. You're watching Late Edition. Stay with us.
तो बार-बार घर बदलता रहता है, हम कहाँ ढूंढते फिरेंगे, किधर है।
अब नहीं होगा। प्रिया ने कहा हर महीने किराया देने से अच्छा है अपनी EMI भरो।
तो हम किराएदार से मकान मालिक बन गए।
मतलब ये घर तुम लोग का है?
सच्ची? But seriously guys, किश्तों से रिश्ता जोड़ो। किराया तो पराया होता है।
आसान किश्तों में होम लोन्स, बैंक ऑफ इंडिया।
अरे बिल बनाने से पहले इन पैकेट्स को तोल तो लीजिए।
ये तो सील्ड पैकेट्स हैं, इन्हें तोलने की क्या जरूरत है?
जरूरत है। जब मैं दाम पूरे वजन का दे रही हूँ, तो मुझे चीज भी तो पूरी मिलनी चाहिए ना।
यहाँ कोई वजन का कांटा नहीं है।
ये तो गलत है। हर दुकानदार जो वेट या टर्नओवर टैक्स पे करने के दायरे में आता है, उनके पास वजन चेक करने के लिए इलेक्ट्रॉनिक वेइंग मशीन होनी चाहिए। माप तोल से संबंधित शिकायत के लिए अपने एरिया के कंट्रोलर ऑफ लीगल मेट्रोलॉजी से संपर्क करें। जागो ग्राहक जागो।
Welcome back. You're watching Late Edition. We are trying to decode some of the reasons for the floods in Jammu and Kashmir and the lessons that we can learn from there. And we have with us Mr. Joydeep Gupta, who's an environmentalist, South Asia Director of Third Pole, and we have Vinod Chandra Menon, former member of the NDMA. Mr. Joydeep Gupta, well, I mean, we've seen that, post Uttarakhand at least, many people have woken up, and Mr. Menon says that local communities. Now, the problem is when local communities they are the victims first, and they don't quite think of becoming, let's say, disaster response force personnel at that point of time. So how does one deal with a situation like this when you are actually facing the deluge and then you're just basically trying to save yourself? Shouldn't there be, close by at least some sort of specialized agencies?
Yes, you need specialized agencies, but Mr. Menon is right that the local communities need to be empowered to the point where they become rescuers rather than victims.
Right. You were saying that in Uttarakhand, you don't know whether the state is prepared now for another disaster like this. Would you think that the people at least are?
Better than before. Definitely, the people are better prepared than before. When I said that the state government doesn't seem to have learned the lessons, what I am referring to is that similar kind of construction is going on, is restarted on the floodplains.
Okay.
The roads and the bridges that are being built in exactly the same way as before. That's what I meant.
Okay.
You see, I think, especially with thanks to people like organizations like NDMA, India is actually very good at handling a disaster when it happens. India is also fairly good in handling the aftermath of a disaster.
All right.
And very good at during the disaster, the rescue and relief, fairly good. What we are no good at is before a disaster, the disaster risk reduction is what they call it.
Oh, we did a pretty good job at Filene.
We did an excellent job with Filene.
So
that was a very encouraging exception. Unfortunately, it was an exception.
Right.
In this case, yes, there was not enough warning, but there have been cases.
So the difference is with the warning.
Yeah, there have been cases with warnings where the warnings have not been. Kosi floods are a case in point.
Okay.
Kosi floods came with sufficient warning, and still the response was late.
Okay.
But it's more than the immediate warning and response. I'm talking about when I'm talking about disaster risk reduction, I'm talking about actually implementing building codes. I'm talking about actually teaching local communities in local schools what to do in a case of a disaster. There's a whole set of series of steps that need to be taken, and we are extremely poor at that.
Okay. Mr. Menon, in terms of, forewarning, and we know that the IMD predicts the weather, and they did a pretty good job with Filene, but with these kind of rains, one doesn't know what's likely to happen on the ground once the rain falls. So is there any system of predicting, the whether heavy rains are likely to cause massive floods?
Yes, in fact, actually, the Indian Met Department's modernization program has actually brought in a lot of new Doppler radars and a lot of new instrumentation, and they have a short and medium term weather forecasting center in IMD, which actually looks at not only forewarning, but also even nowcasting. It's not only just broadcasting and early warning information, but also a real time monitoring of situations like cloudbursts, and you can actually do that in 72 hours, 48 hours, 24 hours of warning, and then that was actually what helped us in the cyclone Filene experience.
Okay.
So technology has now advanced in terms of looking at it, but at the same time, I think Mr. Joydeep Gupta and professionals who actually work in this sector would actually endorse this. There is a need for looking at worst case scenarios.
Okay.
Especially during these kind of monsoon period, we need to know the sufficiently in advance preparedness for a worst case scenario would actually help us, when such eventualities happen.
So we need to have a better reporting system, but we'll talk more about this. We need to take a short commercial break. Do stay with us. You're watching Late Edition.
मैं तो सारे मैसेज पढ़ूंगी। मैं नहीं देखूंगी तुम्हारा मोबाइल।
तू कब आया मोनू?
अब तो मोनू के कॉलेज वापस जाने का टाइम आ गया है। जब भी कॉलेज जाने की बात करो, इसका चेहरा उतर जाता है। कुछ तो गड़बड़ है।
नहीं, नया स्टूडेंट है ना, तो सीनियर तो रैगिंग करते ही होंगे। चिंता वाली कोई बात नहीं।
चिंता की बात है भाई साहब। रैगिंग जैसे गंभीर मामले को नजरअंदाज मत कीजिए। एंटी रैगिंग हेल्पलाइन नंबर पे कॉल करें और उनसे सलाह और सहयोग लें।
एंटी रैगिंग हेल्पलाइन नंबर 1800-180-5522 पर कॉल करें।
सुनिए, आपको याद है कुछ दिनों पहले अखबार में एक कॉन्टेस्ट आया था जिसमें हमने पार्टिसिपेट भी किया था।
हाँ, बहुत अच्छे से याद है। हमने उसमें 5000 रुपए खर्च भी किए थे और जीतने में उसमें इनाम में कार भी थी।
वो कॉन्टेस्ट हमने जीत लिया।
तुम्हें तो खुश होना चाहिए।
इतने छोटे साइज की कार है।
विज्ञापनों में अपर्याप्त सूचना देकर ग्राहकों को भ्रमित करना अनुचित व्यापार पद्धति है। इसके लिए उपभोक्ता अदालत में शिकायत करें।
जागो ग्राहक जागो।
दादाजी, आपका नाम क्या है?
रमेश प्रसाद।
आपको कैसे पता?
ये देखो।
नहीं चलेगा। बर्थ सर्टिफिकेट नहीं है आपके पास? बर्थ सर्टिफिकेट के बिना लाइफ आजकल बहुत मुश्किल हो सकती है। मेरे पास तो है बर्थ सर्टिफिकेट।
बर्थ सर्टिफिकेट स्कूल में एडमिशन, सरकारी नौकरी, वोटर आईडी कार्ड और पासपोर्ट हासिल करने में मदद करता है। इसे आप बच्चे के जन्म स्थान पर 21 दिन के भीतर नगर निगम नगर पालिका से बिल्कुल मुफ्त पाएं।
नन्ही सी जान की पहली पहचान।
Welcome back, and we are now joined on the phone line by Mr. Lakshman Singh Rathod, the Director General of the Indian Meteorological Department. Thanks very much for being with us. So you were predicting heavy rains on the western coast of India, in the western parts, Gujarat, Maharashtra, West Madhya Pradesh, Goa, over the next couple of days. Can you give us more details about this forecast?
The forecast is there is presently a local area which is located over East Rajasthan and adjoining Madhya Pradesh, and the associated circulation is extending up to say 5-7 kilometers up in the atmosphere.
Right.
This coupled with the location of the monsoon trough, which is passing through from the mid of Rajasthan to the Bay of Bengal, is causing a very congenial meteorological situation for heavy rainfall over southern parts of southern and eastern Rajasthan, adjoining Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh.
Okay.
And because of the accentuated flow of the westerlies, parts of South Gujarat, etc.
Right.
But next 2 days, the heavy rainfall is likely to remain confined only to the eastern Rajasthan and the adjoining.
So not in the Himalayan region, not in Jammu and Kashmir, we're not likely to see heavy rains.
Well, Jammu and Kashmir, we don't foresee any heavy rainfall amount. However, there is a small trough in the westerly, so weak western disturbance though there, but its potential to give rainfall, heavy rainfall is ruled out. Only light isolated rainfall can happen. And as far as the adjoining hill states like Himachal and Uttarakhand are concerned, the rainfall may be more than Jammu and Kashmir, but the heavy rainfall and a larger area over J&K is ruled out.
But why are we seeing such heavy rains? So is this a result of climate change? Let me be direct. Is it a result of climate change?
Well, it is not prudent for us to link everything to climate change. It is more of climate variability, and these are kind of typical synoptic situations which do happen in every monsoon-like situation.
No, but we saw it last year in Uttarakhand. We are seeing it this time in Jammu and Kashmir, and we are seeing heavy flooding. You know, we were talking a little earlier about the IMD is the one which gives the predictions, and because of that we build a forewarning system. Is there a system in place that, you know, we can forewarn people about these kind of possibilities of floods?
Yes, as far as the forecast is concerned, the system is in place to issue the forecast and the warnings, and the IMD is doing that.
Okay, sir, but still people get affected by floods, and you know, as we see in Jammu and Kashmir, 42,500 people are to be evacuated. I mean, if some sort of system was in place where people were prepared in advance, you know, they could have moved away. As the success happened in the Phylline, you know, in the cyclone of Phylline.
You see that you can't compare a tropical cyclone with that of the mountainous tragedies. These are very difficult even for prediction to management. Whereas as far as cyclone is concerned, you get a fairly longer lead time, and the level of confidence in the prediction of the associated weather is also better than that of mountainous weather conditions.
Right. So finally, sir, one last question. You don't believe that, you know, climate change is really changing the weather patterns of India as we've seen in the last few years? I mean, we've seen some very unusual weather patterns. We've seen cloud bursts. We've seen a lot of floods in places which we don't see them.
Not that I don't believe. Climate change is a reality. Climate change is a reality. And but the individual or episodes, these episodes, well, maybe a part of larger subset of climate change, but they have to be looked more into with the backdrop of the current synoptic situation.
Okay, we leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Lakshman Singh Rathore, the Director General of the IMD. Well, we'll turn to you, Mr. Gupta. So you saw that, you heard him. Doesn't believe quite so much that this is really the effect of climate change, maybe climate variables is what he says.
I agree with Mr. Rathore. You cannot ascribe lone events to climate change. I think climate scientists are also not saying that. What any responsible climate scientist and the latest report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is saying that what is more likely to happen is that the extreme weather events like floods, like storms, like droughts will get more frequent and more severe. But you cannot ascribe a lone event to climate change. On the Indian monsoon, they have said
but if you give into this sort of an argument, then people will say that, okay, let's go on developing, and this concept of, you know, development in these fragile ecosystems, people don't take them so seriously.
Yeah, but scientists, as of today, see, as a journalist, I report what scientists say. Scientists, as of today, do not have the confidence and the knowledge to ascribe single events, weather events, to climate change, as Mr. Rathore pointed out. What they do say is that the Indian monsoon specifically is likely to get more erratic, more intense rainfall over a shorter period of time. You see, the Indian monsoon is supposed to be spread over 4 months.
Sure.
So instead of that, small bursts, more intense bursts, just like what we are seeing.
Right. Mr. Menon, we were supposed to have a drought actually this year. I mean, but we are seeing now, you know, the monsoon delaying itself and into September, and we are seeing heavy rains at this point of time.
Yes.
Would you not think that this is because of climate change?
Actually, that's an interesting question. You know, one of the things which we need to reconcile ourselves with is the fact that extreme events are becoming more and more, you know, repeating, and there's an increasing frequency in extreme events, let's say. And you know, what is called unprecedented rainfall is actually happening in many parts of the country, and that is also a worrying indication that you know, we need to really understand. For instance, a few years ago we had floods in Barmer in Rajasthan, you know, which is a desert area,
right?
And the local people are not used to floods, and so there was a problem that you know, the water, actually the submergence of many villages actually where the local sand actually has a lot of gypsum, and so the water cannot actually be absorbed and the water cannot go away. So there were a lot of waterborne diseases which happened in that area because people are not used to that, and then there is no system of draining out this water. They are not used to that kind of you know, systems like in other flood prone areas. So I think some of these are actually indications that, you know, we need to understand the climate variability
more than
and
understanding,
weather
we
patterns.
need to, I mean, you've already created guidelines. I mean, in case things like this happen, people have to be prepared.
That's right.
But more than guidelines, I mean, to add more teeth to it, shouldn't it be law? I mean, could there be law?
See, actually there are agencies which are looking at climate change. The very fact that the Ministry of Environment and Forests is responsible for looking at climate change issues, and then there is also the this is a separate body within the Prime Minister's office which actually is the Council on Climate Change. So these agencies actually are supposed to be addressing concerns related to that, and you know, related to climate change. So the National Disaster Management Authority has to also have overlaps with such agencies like the Council on Climate Change, the Ministry of Environment and Forests, and so on, and also the Coastal Zone Regulation Authority, you know, looking at storm surges which are happening, cyclonic storms which are increasingly becoming more frequent. I think we need to balance out some of these issues also. And the very fact that when we were expecting that there will be about 300 odd districts which will suffer from drought, and then, you know, we have this kind of a paradox situation when you have a sudden devastating flood which becomes a national calamity, is actually something which is a challenge for all of us to really address and then come up with you know, better preparedness.
Mr. Joydeep Gupta, you you know, focused on the Himalayan systems. It's a fragile ecosystem, we know that, and we know that in the northeast there are a lot of movements against projects when they develop, but perhaps on the rest of the, you know, maybe Uttarakhand there wasn't too many, but there are. So I mean, it's people's movements that can prevent and at least, you know, safeguard this modern, I mean this system, the Himalayan system, which is actually fragile, and if we meddle with it, we see landslides, we see it change, the rivers changing course, we get worried. I mean, we can cause serious damage.
There is good reason to worry. There is good reason to worry. At the same time, for the, as far as the people living there are concerned, they want development, they need development, they need roads, they need better standard of living. But then the question becomes, how do you make
Should there be a law that for the Himalayas?
That has been suggested many times in the now I supposedly defunct Planning Commission. They actually came up with a whole set of guidelines specifically for the Himalayan ecosystem. That is in the national, there is a national mission. One of the 8 national missions on climate change is a national mission for sustaining the Himalayan ecosystem. So the guidelines are there. Whether they should be changed into laws has to be up to the state governments in a federal system.
Fair enough. I think we've run short of time, so we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us here on Late Edition. Now, some of the lessons that were learned from the Uttarakhand disaster, they, you know, may be worth mentioning once again. Over there, we saw that the locals helped a great deal. and it's not someone else's work, as Mr. Menon was saying. And even though we don't anticipate very heavy rains all the time, we can actually anticipate landslides in these areas, and should be prepared for them, and the Himalayas should be prepared for this in the future as well. Constructions also very close to riverbanks have to be discouraged. Pooling of lessons or standard operating procedures, for disaster management. We keep on coming up with these soon after we have disasters, and if they can be documented, these can always reduce the problems. Climate change fluctuations and the impacts, they have become worse, and we must anticipate them and not presume that they are not going to take place. And also we know that the Army and Air Force are always there, standby, doing a great job, and we thank them, the armed forces and the NDRF, for their continuous help in rescuing people in Jammu and Kashmir. More than 42,500 people have been rescued. We'll leave it there. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.